Welcome to Making Magic Happen. If you are a sensitive person, this channel is for you. Make magic happen in your life with Jennifer Sheldon. Subscribe for new and interesting information that will change your life for the better. Sensitive people are innately born with the capacity of feeling that insensitive people simply don't have. Basically, at birth, people are born at different levels of sensitivity. People like you who have these higher levels of sensitivity, it means that when you focus on a particular subject, your mind absorbs that subject or you're drawn into the subject, that object outside of yourself, the relationship, the circumstance, etc. You absorb it more deeply than a person of less sensitivity. It absorbs your concentration. It pulls you. It absorbs you, meaning your focus on it is greater. For instance, if you would look into a room and then take a pair of binoculars and focus on one small area in that room, or even a microscope and look at an object, how one tiny object is blown up for you. That happens in your mind because sensitivity absorbs a subject and is consumed by a subject much greater than insensitivity. What happens is the more you focus on it, the more you become attached to it, involved with it, you blend with it. You become emotionally involved with it, like the old joke, the guy's in love with his car, or a person becomes a workaholic. What happens is your sensitivity overly focuses on a subject of importance in your life, and then because of the mechanics of sensitivity, not necessarily your personality, and then this is the part that is difficult to understand. The more you focus on something, absorb it, interact with it, think about it, and feel it, the more there is going to be an emotional reaction from it. Because the thought process and the emotional process interact with each other, they work together. Emotions are natural emanations or responses to thoughts and activities. They go together. So, you don't separate them. So anything you get involved in, you're also bringing your entire emotional content of your mind, the entire apparatus. Whenever you focus on something, then it keeps getting bigger and bigger. Because when a sensitive person focuses on one subject, they're putting it under a microscope and blowing it up. In science and biology books, objects are blown up 1,000 times. So what happens in the mind is the more sensitive you are, the more the subject is blown up in your mind, and then consequently the higher the emotional content, the stronger the emotional reaction that you receive. A particular thought triggers an emotion. If it's a good thought, a positive thought, then it triggers a positive emotion. And vice versa, a fear, a worry, triggers a negative emotion. The emotional level is always in proportion to the degree your mind focused on it. If you've blown something up as twice as big as it is, then the emotional reaction is twice as big as it should be. If you've made something 3 times as big as it is, and it's not going well, then your negative reaction is 3 times more than it should be. For instance, if someone I didn't like called me up and said they weren't going to see me anymore, I'd say okay, fine, with very little emotional reaction. If someone I was desperately in love with called me up and told me the same thing, there might be a very strong emotional reaction. So the more you focus on something, the more it threatens you, or the more important you've made it. What happens then is sensitive people focus on minute aspects of their life and make them life itself. Whereas insensitive people do not take in anything deeply. They get a greater panorama of life. A subject for another time. The sensitive person is consumed by their object of focus. You focus on the subject and made it bigger and bigger and bigger because the mechanism for sensitivity blew it up, and now it's overwhelming. Now, when you approach it, it is so overwhelming in importance and relevance that the enormous degree that the mechanics of your mind have blown it out of proportion, you've become emotionally overwhelmed to something that really, if someone else looks at it, it's really nothing. It God, because the mechanism in your mind for sensitivity has absorbed it 1,000 times bigger than it really is, like a microscope blowing up a piece of your cell, and you look at it, and it's 1,000 times bigger than it really is. Now, what is the real size of it? What's the reality? For monster movies, they have sometimes just used a little bug and blown it up and put it on the screen, and people are frightened by the monster they think they see. And all they did was blow up an ant. That's what the nature of sensitivity does with lots of subjects. But it's not you individually necessarily, but that's what the nature of what sensitivity does. That's why all sensitive people get trapped in life, because they only deal with 3 or 4 subjects. A relationship, a parent, a job, school. They got overly consumed with a few subjects, paralyzed by them, lost in them, and then they lose the overall sense of life, the balance of life, and then they do not become successful. Whereas the insensitive do not become consumed in the same sense that the sensitive do, they become interested in something totally, devoted to it, and then they use it as a tool to get what they want. They use it as energy to do what they want to do for themselves. What the sensitive person must do is practice talking to oneself and say, "What am I doing? This is nothing. In the grand scheme of things, this is not that important. I'm making more of this than it is," knowing that the mind is doing it. For instance, suppose you had a mental disorder where when you met new people, you instantly hated them. And then a psychiatrist said to you, "This is a pattern you got when you were a child. But you don't really hate them. It's just a mental pattern." So when you met people, you could say, "Gee, I don't really hate them. This isn't me. This is this disease I have. I'm going to try not to do it." So, when you know something is happening mechanically to you rather than it is you, that's the difference in knowledge. So, when you get this way, it's happened to you. You can't say it is you. When you are overwhelmed by a subject, you have to say, "Aha, the sensitivity mechanism has blown this out of proportion, and it's taken me emotionally with it. This really isn't the right approach. This is the effect of the sensitivity mechanism, and it's trying to do this with all subjects," and you have to make a mental adjustment knowing that. All sensitive people focus on some subjects which become 10, 50, 100 times bigger than they should. We focus on it, and then it becomes so big and so important and so overwhelming that we can't even handle it anymore emotionally, because the more the sensitivity mechanism focuses on it, the greater the emotional content. And that's what happens to all sensitive people. It feels important and big, but just as if you looked through a microscope and something looks big, you'd say to yourself, "It isn't that big. The lens is blowing it up. Why isn't there that mental adjustment?" Because you don't have this knowledge, your mind's thinking that it's that important. You're not saying to yourself, "This sensitivity mechanism had blown this up." If you had a microscope in your hand and you know the mechanics of the microscope, you know these things are not that big. You make that adjustment easily. But when it comes to looking at life, you won't do that. The sensitivity mechanism is supposed to work like that, but it's given to us for a different reason. The sensitivity mechanism belongs to your purpose. If you'd like to know the reason you have the sensitivity mechanism, subscribe to receive future videos.